Mr. Merriman, are you getting married today or something?
What?
Mr. Merriman's all dressed up for the meeting.
Oh, is he?
I think we're live
had a
now,
wet-
right, Matt?
Yep, exactly when Ray said that. So that worked out well. So with that, and we'll note Sean's really nice snazzy suit this evening, the best dressed of all of us. We'll call the meeting for June 1st, 2020 to order and move right on to item 2, approval of tonight's agenda. If I could get a motion on that recommendation to approve tonight's agenda. Moved by Councillor Ostrander and seconded by Councillor McConnell. Any comments, questions on the agenda this evening? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? Motion is carried. Item 3, declarations of interest. Any member of council have a declaration for us this evening? Seeing none. So moving along to item 4, that's minutes of our last council meeting. And under 4.1, the minutes from the special council meeting of May 19th, 2020, and the recommendation being that those meeting minutes dated May 19th, 2020 be accepted as presented. Can I have a mover, please? Moved by Councillor Burton, seconded by Councillor Jansman. Any discussion, comments, or questions on that set of minutes? Seeing none, I'll proceed with the question then. All in favor? Motion's carried. So moving right along to item 5, communications and petitions. 5.1 is action items, no action items on the agenda tonight. 5.2 is information items distributed as always under separate cover. If I could get a mover for that recommendation that the information items under separate cover be received and filed, please. Moved by Councillor Jansman, seconded by Councillor Shankar. Open that up for discussion. Did anyone want to refer anything from the info pack on to a future meeting or discuss anything there this evening? See just a few items. Councillor Burton, please.
Thank you. I just want to make a comment on the thank you letter from South Food Bank. It really shows their dedication and commitment to the residents. And I also want to thank the volunteers that have volunteered over the years. And a lot of people have also stepped up during this time to donate. So here's to that as well. So thank you.
Absolutely. Fine words, Councillor Burton. They've done an amazing job through this entire crisis. Any other comments from items in the info pack this evening? Seeing none, then I'll proceed with the motion then. All in favor? Motion is carried. So moving on to the heart of the agenda tonight, the staff reports under item 6. We do have staff report under 6.135-2020. That's our usual COVID-19 actions update. So I'll turn it over to Mr. Armstrong to run through that report for this week.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. So as you can see, the state of emergency was extended to June 2nd. Publicly funded schools will remain closed until the end of June. And as of May 26th, the regulated health professionals in Ontario can gradually restart. And I believe there's about a dozen professions that that applies to. And certainly I've included in the report exactly what that means. And then on May 27th, 2020, all provincial emergency orders were renewed until June 9th. So for basically another 10 days. Federal emergency orders pretty much stay the same. And then the border remains closed to non-residents until June 21st, at which time it will be reviewed. Not a lot to update in terms of the town's activities in the last 2 weeks. Been fairly quiet. There was a couple of more changes on the weekend in terms of drive-in movie theaters as well as backcountry camping. And so for the movie theaters, it was any drive-in movie theater that was in existence at May 29th. So that was just one clarification there. I did want to just touch on the Pride actions that we're doing. So the Pride crosswalk will be repainted this week, weather depending, and as well as the installation of the flagpole will happen this week or next. And the intention is to raise the flag on June 15th and perhaps a mayor's proclamation on that date as well. So that was one of the items that came out of last meeting to want an update, and certainly just wanted to provide that here. But other than that, it's a fairly straightforward report this time. Thank you.
Try that again with the mic on. Open it up for discussion with everyone this evening. Any comments, questions for Mr. Armstrong? Councilor McConnell, please.
I think I recall reading in there that park benches are now allowed to be, I don't know if open is the proper word, but usable. Are we going to do something about that? Are we going to make our benches now usable to folks? And I know they don't all have signs on them. Some of them do, and I've had some comments about them, and I'm wondering.
I can speak to that if you'd like, Mr. Mayor.
Please.
So we did have a consultation with the health unit as part of our emergency management group. They would prefer that we keep them closed at this time, just to promote that social distance or physical distancing and people not gathering. So we continue that, but more than happy to take back any feedback we might have to the emergency control group for consideration. But we did discuss that at both our last two meetings, and the health unit is still recommending that be put in place just to help reinforce the guidelines and people not gathering together.
Thank you very much, Mr. Armstrong. Follow up, Councilor McConnell?
No, the comments I've had have been from older folks, and in particular in the long walk down to east of the marina there, and they feel that they should be able to have a sit, and quite frankly, I can't blame them. And if I was tired, if there was no sign on the bench, I'd probably sit down myself. But it's not that we want to get a crowd gathering around a bunch. That's a different, or a bench rather. That's a different situation entirely. But individuals, a couple sitting on a bench, passing a little bit of time, I don't see a problem with it, quite frankly. And I think that should be conveyed to the health unit. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councilor McConnell. I got to say, I agree with that. At this point now, with the numbers so low locally, it is something we'll bring back and have a good discussion about it at the next emergency control group meeting. Any other comments, questions for Mr. Armstrong this evening on his report? Seeing none, it's good then. We'll move along to 6.2, and that's staff report 36-2020 community grant program allocations. The recommendation reading council will approve the following 2020 community grant payments: $2,700 for minor soccer, $1,000 for Girls Incorporated, and $18,000 for the St. Lawrence Shakespeare Festival. Do I have someone willing to make that motion to get this on the table? Moved by Councilor Young. Do I have a seconder? Councilor Ostrander. Sorry, Mike, I just barely saw the finger raised there. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Armstrong. Any comments on this this evening? I know this was obviously a significant topic of some discussion a couple weeks ago.
Certainly. So in here, it's the incorporation of the $2,700 requested by Prescott Minor Soccer to reflect the amounts that they put out to try and get the season going, and we'll return them back to a even spot for next year when they work towards the 2021 season. Girls Incorporated, we did contact them in terms of the donation in kind that they were requesting for usage of the Leo Boyven Community Center in the summer. They see that that is likely going to be problematic, and so they're looking at virtual alternatives as well as continuing to engage. But the other part of their grant request is $1,000 to offset subsidies for those that aren't able to afford programming. And so staff recommendation is to continue with that. That's I think we've funded them for the last 2 or 3, perhaps even 4 years for that $1,000 to provide subsidies. And so would recommend that we continue with that as they are continuing to provide programming to girls in our area. And finally, St. Lawrence Shakespeare, based on our last council meeting and the presentation they made. I did want to outline that while the total amount is 18,000, as per the St. Lawrence Shakespeare Festival, they said they'd be more than happy to split that in 2 equal payments. So one now and then one further in the year. So while it doesn't reflect that in the recommendation, I did want to make that point that we would only pay half now and then when requested, pay the other half. Other than that, that's about it. Thank you.
Forgetting to hit that mute button tonight. Open it up for comments, questions. Thanks, Mr. Armstrong, for that report. Members of council, any comments this evening? Councilor McConnell.
I think we were looking for some kind of a report from soccer to indicate what expenses they had with the $2,700. Like, is that just out the window, or is that a purchasing of some kind of materials that they will be able to use next year if the season goes ahead?
Mr. Armstrong, we did have a letter from them, I believe, in, was it the last info package or the last council meeting describing some of the financial circumstances they're experiencing right now. But Matt, if you want to just touch on that briefly for Councilor McConnell.
Sure. So we didn't include it in this package, but it was included in the last info package, the $2,700 breakdown. I believe a substantial part of it was for advertising and whatnot for this year, but there was also deposits on clothing orders and things like that hopefully will help reduce future costs. But certainly that was kind of how they identified, is if they receive $2,700, that will put them back to even for starting next year. And anything that they're able to recoup, then certainly that would they would go towards that as well.
Thank you very much, Mr. Armstrong. Anything further on that, Councilor McConnell?
No, I must apologize. Last week's information items didn't come through here, so I should have seen that last week. Otherwise, I wouldn't have asked.
Thank you. I think I saw Councilor Jansman. Did you have your hand up?
Yes, just an inquiry question. It was listed generally what the $2,700 was going to spend, but it didn't make mention of any sponsors. So I was just curious. I'm going to agree with this. $2,700 is fine, but do minor hockey, minor soccer, or figure skating, do they still have to did we ever adopt the process or the conversation we spoke about of having a final year-end report?
Yes, we did.
Okay, so that's going to occur anyway, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, it's just perfect. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councilor Jansman. Any further comments before I call the question? Just a quick one of my own. Just want to thank all our groups that receive funding. It's been a very difficult year for everyone. I'm glad we're still able to support where we can here and assist all these organizations, because we've got to get them through this year and hopefully get back to some sense of normalcy in 2021. So thanks for all the volunteers to all these organizations that do so much for the community. With that, I will call the question. All in favor? Motion is carried. Thank you. 6.3, we have staff report 37-2020 on Canada-US border crossings, essential traffic, COVID-19. Sorry, as I scroll to it here, Mr. Armstrong.
Thank you. So fairly short on this one. I believe it was pulled out of the package for the information package for the last meeting. And so really I'm just putting in here what was part of that resolution and the update that the Canada-US border will remain closed to non-essential traffic until June 21st. That includes crossings made by land, sea, and air. And so I think the intention was to have a discussion this evening as to if there was a intention of kind of supporting this and the merits of it of continuing even after June 21st. But certainly I'll pass it back over to Council.
You're mute again, Brett.
Thanks, Ray. It keeps going off my screen this week. Usually I can see it all the time. I've just got to keep my cursor there. Anyhow, we obviously did discuss this a little bit at the last meeting. It has come up with a number of border mayors. You do see the copy of the resolution that was provided. It's sort of a moot point now because the same day of our last meeting, of course, the federal government did announce they were extending the closure to the 21st of June. So everyone knows the status we're in right now with the border. Wouldn't shock me if it's extended beyond the 21st of June, given recent incidents in the United States, but it's still obviously open now. And so I'll open it up for comments, questions on this topic. That was easy. So we'll move right along. I didn't miss any hands. They're all good. Okay, and obviously we'll update on that as we hear more through the emergency control group and what the federal government's doing there with the border restrictions. So on to 6.4, and this is some regular business for a change, which is good to see. Staff report 38-2020, two-lane intersection stop bar changes. The recommendation being that council direct staff to implement the following changes to two-lane intersection stop bars town of Prescott in 2020, if feasible, or in 2021. The first one is Edward Street at Churchill Road. Move the stop bar back on the middle southbound lane to allow for an easier turning radius for large vehicles turning left from Churchill Road onto Edward Street to head north. And the second one being Edward Street at King Street. Move the stop bars back in the inner lane southbound on Edward Street at King, westbound on King Street at Edward Street, and eastbound on King Street at Edward Street to allow for an easier turning radius for large vehicles. Do I have a motion for that recommendation to get it on the table? Councillor Young, seconded by Councillor Ostrander. Turn it back over to staff. Sean, are you handling this?
No, actually, I'm handling this.
Okay.
So if you're okay with it, I would like to share my screen just because it's 50 times easier to explain the picture than it is to try to explain it through words. So just bear with me. Okay, so at this moment, I'm hoping you're able to see the intersection of Edward and Churchill. And so we took a look at this intersection, and you'll see on the north side of the intersection, on the southbound lane, which is the left-hand turn lane that goes on to Churchill East, we would suggest moving the stop bar back so that any large vehicles turning left to head northbound on Edward would just have a little bit more room to negotiate that. When you take a look at the other parts of the intersection, very few large vehicles will be turning left down Churchill to go east. Basically, that center lane has been blocked off on Churchill when you're heading west. So that certainly allows for a nice round corner there. And then we've also you can see that the additional center lane that could have run up to head south on Edward is actually eliminated, and it only becomes one lane there. So really the only other lane that we would have to worry about is this one right here. It's a southbound innermost lane, and just being able to pull that back a small amount. So then when you take a look at King Street and Edward, and hopefully you're able to see this, is that again, you're taking a look at the innermost lanes. So the stop bar that for the southbound lane on Edward at King will be pulled back. So anyone turning left or right onto Edward Street from King Street would have a little bit more space to use. Then from on King Street, the eastbound lane, which is the left-hand turn lane, will be pulled back. So anyone making the corner onto King Street would have a little bit more space. And then finally, the westbound lane, which is this one right here, will be pulled back to allow anyone turning left from Edward onto King Street a little bit more space. So we took a look at all of our two-lane intersections and tried to make recommendations based on that. And really that's what you're seeing this evening as how we would see that work. So with that being done, I'll stop sharing and pass it back over to council. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Mr. Armstrong. Absolutely was much easier to follow with the pictures on all our screens. Any comments, questions on the report this evening and the recommendations? Councillor Burton, then Councillor McConnell.
Thank you. I think this is a fabulous idea. There's always issues when trucks are trying to turn corners, but the only thing that I'm concerned about is visibility when you're turning the corner for smaller vehicles. Do you think that's going to be an issue?
So
Mr. Armstrong?
through you, Mr. Mayor. So no, because the vehicle will stop at the stop line and then proceed into the intersection once the light turns green. So because these are both intersections that are regulated by stoplights, then that concern goes away. But so we had to work through that internally as staff to make sure that, you know, that made sense in terms of that. So we had the exact same question. And then once we realized, okay, they'll be stopped at the stoplight, and then once it turns green, then both sides will be stopped and they can proceed into the intersection and have that visibility for them. So we're comfortable from that perspective.
Okay, thank you. I'm glad that you guys went down that avenue and figured that out.
Yeah,
Thank you.
absolutely, because we had the exact same question. We're like, okay, wait a second, and then yeah, it worked.
Mhm.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Burton. Councillor McConnell, please.
I think you've done an excellent job on that. I've no considerations about anything that you've done there. My only comment would be, though, I've noticed if I am proceeding, let's see, west on Churchill Road and I want to turn south over the overpass, the opposing traffic that's coming in my direction from Churchill Road west is considerably north of where I am. The lines don't line up there because of the cross hatching in the middle of Churchill Road west of that intersection. So if you're turning south and there's somebody facing you that wants to turn north, you can basically hit head on in the middle of that intersection. You've got to deviate quite a way south to avoid hitting somebody there, or the person that is coming east has to deviate quite a bit north. I'm wondering if you're going to do that, maybe you should back up the hash marks on the north side. I'm sorry, on the south side of Edward and Churchill as well to accommodate that. Do you know what I'm describing?
Mr. Armstrong?
Yeah, so if I can paraphrase, you're concerned about the traffic that's headed west across Edward Street from Churchill. So if I'm coming on Churchill, I arrive at Edward Street, and if I'm crossing the intersection, it doesn't correctly align with
No, it's not even
Churchill.
close.
Pardon?
The eastbound lane on the west side of Edward actually aligns with well, it aligns with the eastbound lane, but if you're turning, if you have two vehicles stopped at that corner and they both want to turn, one wants to turn south, one wants to turn north, they're really turning into each other's pathway. You have to kind of watch that. So what I found is I have to kind of deviate south quite a bit to compensate for that, to get out of that other person's line of traffic. And if there's somebody sitting right at the bottom of the overpass, sometimes that's difficult. You have to wait for the other traffic to clear in order to turn, and you really shouldn't have to do that. Or maybe it's just me. Maybe it's just me and my peculiar driving habits. I don't know, but perhaps Leanne or Mike, who live out in the north end there, have experienced that, or might like to comment on it.
Any further discussion on that? Councillor Ostrander, please.
Yeah, well, I understand where Lee's coming from with that. It's a little tight there for the turning, but by moving the southbound Edward stop for turning, it's going to allow a little more room. You're cutting the corner a bit both ways, but it should be a little bit better if you're just driving an average size car. Now, sometimes there's a 5-ton truck wanting to make that turn, and it, out of courtesy, they wait until the car has turned coming the other way. But it's not too bad. But again, it's driver awareness. I mean, you have to cooperate when you're making those turns. So it's up to an individual case, really. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Councilor Ostrander. Any further discussion? Mr. Armstrong, any other response back to that? Oh, sorry, Councilor Young.
It's a little unrelated, Brett, but that intersection light for the large trucks coming out of Prescott and Strader Ferris, the timing on their green light is very, very short. For them to come to drive east and then try to turn north, they're liable to only get one truck through that intersection at a time. And if you've got 2 or 3 cars and a truck, not everybody's going to make the turn. So I'm wondering if the next time that company comes in to service those lights, if we could consider adjusting the timing for just a little bit more, a few more seconds, to maybe allow a few more cars to turn, trucks to turn left onto Edward. I believe it's new enough. The control box is new enough that we can adjust it and fine tune it at any time. So perhaps if the next time they come in to check the lights, we could just try it. Obviously, it's going to have to change down the road when there's a new arena at the end of Churchill, because you could never just allow 2 or 3 vehicles to make that turn at one time. That's long in the future, unfortunately.
Hopefully not too far in the future, but yeah, it's a little further off than it was a few months ago.
Yeah.
Mr. Armstrong, can we look at that? That's a good point. It is that light does change fairly quickly there, especially for trucks.
Yeah, we're more than happy to, so we'll have some time we'll spend from some observation standpoint to just see how it's functioning, and I'm sure it can be adjusted, so not a problem at all.
Great, thanks very much. Any further comments on this item this evening? Just had one quick question myself for Mr. Armstrong, just in regards to the timing of the painting.
So we're supposed to be having line painting done this week. So we're hoping that we can get that communication to them and that sort of thing. If they happen to do it, then with the current configuration, then we'll take the opportunity to either remove that and move them back, or do it as part of next year's painting. So it's all just a matter of timing and when they get to doing that this year, making sure that we can get the communication to them.
Okay, and the other question I just had on that, we did make a few changes. I know, and it doesn't necessarily have to involve painting in this round, but we did make that one change or 2 changes on King Street, was it now, by Shoppers Drug Mart, and I forget actually how we proceeded on the liquor store one, but I know we did proceed with the Shoppers Drug Mart closing that one section and making that an accessible parking space. And also we had the concerns about people parking in front of, in particular, the Turkish restaurant and the Royal Bank with regards to the traffic lights. And we talked about painting that off. So obviously it's not a perfect solution for the winter time, but it is for probably 8-9 months of the year. It helps. So I'm hoping we've got that arranged in our line painting this year.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're actually going to do some of that work ourselves in terms of, and actually blocking off, we're coming up with some ideas to make it a little bit more pleasant looking than just concrete barriers for where Shoppers Drug Mart is, but certainly that's on the to-do list for this year.
Excellent. Thank you. I think I saw Councilor McConnell's hand up a moment ago. Lee, did you have a comment?
Yeah, just a question, actually. We ground out the old markings on King Street, I noticed last week or the week before. Are we going to do the same thing with these lines that we're replacing, moving back? Are they going to be painted out, or are we just going to let them wear off, or what are we doing there?
I think grinding is probably one of the better alternatives to be able to just make sure that we don't have to keep doing it over and over and over. And so that would be my recommendation. We can always paint them out if that's the desire, but we will end up having to repaint it. every year because that covering paint does fade fairly quickly.
So we'd be doing that at the same time?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor McConnell. Councillor Shankar.
Thank you. Can we make sure that we let the public know that we're doing this in a simple type of way? Like, I don't think we need pictures, but just tell them that we're moving the line back, because I've seen enough of this. When we change the lights down Main Street, people do not pay attention, and then they blame everyone else, and it's not their fault. They didn't see it. They didn't know it was there. So, if we can make a concentrated effort to add it to a newsletter or throw it on social media, then we can say as a council that we've done our best to inform the public of why we're doing this and make it easier for trucks turning in town.
Very good point.
Yeah, I'd be more than happy to work with our communications and clerks department to make sure we get that out. We'll try to do it in coordination of when that's happening. And yeah, social media, obviously a good way to go. Then we'll also put something in the newspaper to just show people that we are making some minor changes at those intersections. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sounds good. We've got the clerk department right here with us this evening. So thanks so much. Any further comments, questions on that item? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? Motion's carried. Thanks, everyone. And a couple more staff reports this evening. Both good news, actually. 6.5 is staff report 39-2020, site plan control agreement for 950 Industrial Road. Mr. Merriman, I think you do have this.
Had to remember to unmute. Back in January, building permit was submitted by CAI Inc., who's over on Industrial Road. They were creating a 103 square meter fabric covered structure. For those of you that are like me that are in feet, that's about 1,200 square feet. The purpose of the structure was to make sure that the offloading site for the tanks had a catch basin and a reclaiming tank type system in case there was any sort of spill. And then the dome over top was to make sure that not excess water would end up in the reclaimed tanks, because they have to pump them out and ship them, off site. They certainly didn't want to, fill that up with a lot of rainwater. It met all the zoning. However, because it was greater than 50 square meters, it did have to go into site plan control. However, because the fire department was involved in everything else, and the Ministry of Environment and everything else, the process pretty much went through clearly, and site plan controls just an administrative way to catch up with what's required on the site. It went before PAC last week. I'm pretty sure it was last week. And it passed there and then was forwarded on to council for consideration.
Thanks very much, Sean. I will open it up to council for comments, questions. I see Councillor Young has his hand up already. Ray?
Thank you, Sean. Page 37 in our package, the first drawing.
Okay, just give me a second. Let me get there.
The overhead plan, Ray?
Yes.
Yeah, I think I know the one you're talking about. It's amazing how thick these reports get some days. But basically, the fabric covered structure is on the north side of the property, next to.
Okay. John, I was having trouble citing that on the property. Could you tell me where Industrial Road is and Irvine Drive?
Okay, so Irvine Drive is the road that runs east and west, and Industrial runs north and south there.
Okay,
And
but
so this fabric covered structure will be close to Irvine Road.
okay. Got it. So industrial is the one on the left side of the drawing.
Correct.
Okay.
Anything further, Ray?
Just what is the new part? Just the most extreme, the building closest to Irvine is the newest part?
Well, like I say, when you're looking at the second picture there, where it shows Irvine and industrial that's in color.
Yeah.
Basically, you come in off Irvine off that driveway.
Right.
And you go down that driveway that goes like immediately to industrial, and the fabric covered structure will be right there. And it's just to protect the trucks while they're unloading. There's no production or anything like that in this. It's just a separate building.
Okay. And how close is it to industrial?
Well, it's quite a ways from industrial. It would be a good 100+ feet away. The close area where we were concerned was actually on the Irvine side. It was, but it did have just enough. It had the 3 meters clearance. So.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks very much, Councillor Young. Other comments, questions on this report for Mr. Merriman this evening? Seeing no further comments, just scroll back myself here. Seeing no further comments, then we do have the recommendation to approve site plan control agreement for 950 Industrial Road, file number SPC 2020-01, subject to the following conditions. Balance of any outstanding taxes, including penalties and interest, shall be paid to the town of Prescott. Item 2, any charges in relation to improvement or development shall be paid to the town of Prescott. And 3, that the agreement and schedules attached are registered on title. Do I have a mover for that, please? Moved by Councillor Burton, seconded by 4 people at once. I'll take Councillor Jansman. Any further discussion? I just want to comment just very briefly. It's nice, as I said in the PAC meeting last week, it's nice to see CAI still investing in their property here in town. They've been a big part of Prescott for a long time, actually, kind of quietly sitting back there. But this is a very nice investment in their operation here that we're all greatly appreciative of. So with that, I'll call the question. All in favor? Motion carried. And the final staff report this evening is 6.6. That's staff report 40-2020, site plan control agreement for 171 King Street West. I'll do this in the proper order this time. Recommendation being that council approve site plan control agreement 171 King Street West, file number SPC 2020-02, subject to the following conditions. 1, balance of any outstanding taxes, including penalties and interest, shall be paid to the town of Prescott. 2, any charges in relation to improvement or development shall be paid to the town of Prescott. 3, that an approved record of site condition be received from the Ministry of the Environment prior to occupancy being granted. And 4, that the agreement and schedules attached are registered on title. Do I have a mover for that, please? Moved by Councillor Jansman, seconded by Councillor Shankar, and turn it over to staff for to take us through the report and what was presented to the planning committee last week.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. So when you're taking a look at this, 171 King Street West, for the majority of people know that as the Daniel's Hotel lot. And certainly that's the one vacant property that we have kind of in the middle of our downtown core. So this has been a kind of an iterative process. We started back, I believe, in late 2018 discussing this. In early 2019, there was a minor variance granted for both a reduction of 1 required parking spot as well as an increase in the density allowed for the property. That went through committee of adjustment and was subsequently approved, and no appeals were received for that. This evening, what you're seeing in front of you is a site plan control because of the nature of this development and that it's over 2 dwelling units, that it is required to go through site plan control. The proposed building is a 16-unit apartment building. The first floor will be indoor parking, and then the second and third floor will be the apartments. There'll be 2 one-bedroom apartments, 10 two-bedroom apartments, and 4 three-bedroom apartments. It'll have a secure pedestrian entrance off of King Street, and then all vehicle traffic will come in and off of Water Street. As part of this process, we certainly worked through a number of engineering studies and reports to ensure that it conforms and that we're not going to be having or causing concerns later on. So the servicing and stormwater management report and engineering was peer reviewed and submitted by the engineering firm for the developer, as well as peer reviewed by EVB Engineering for the town. And the stormwater will actually connect onto King Street because there is no stormwater connection on Water Street. However, the sanitary and the water main will connect onto Water Street. This will reduce the amount of disruption to King Street, as well as there's adequate capacity on Water Street to be able to do that. Fire protection, this building isn't equipped with a standpipe or sprinkler system. It's not required as part of the building regulations in Ontario, but certainly the engineering report did touch on that to ensure that there was adequate number of fire hydrants in the area that would be able to support fire suppression if it was to occur. We also had the developer work through what we call a parking swept path analysis and a sightline analysis. The parking analysis was from the standpoint of movement of vehicles within the building itself. So when you're parking, I believe 18 vehicles in a fairly enclosed space, we want to make sure that people would be able to negotiate that parking structure well. There was no identified issues. It was peer reviewed by McIntosh Perry. The sightline part of that analysis is from entering and exiting the building for vehicular traffic off and on Water Street. And so we wanted to make sure that there was the necessary ability to make the turn and the corners, as well as no sightline issues with either entering or exiting the building and being able to look both ways on Water Street. Again, that was peer reviewed by McIntosh Perry. We had the developer do a noise brief as part of the submission for site plan control. And really what it was doing was taking a look at the building materials to ensure that the infiltration of sound into the building itself and into the residential units would be acceptable from a noise infiltration standpoint. The information was peer reviewed by McIntosh and Perry, and it was deemed to be sufficient for what the intention is here. And finally, the site plan and landscape plan summary. That's really the meat and potatoes of what we're taking a look at and discussing this evening. So you can see when you take a look at that site plan, the building is slightly offset to one side of the property. There'll be approximately 5 meters on one side, 3 meters on the other. And that was to accommodate an extra visitor parking loading drop off of Water Street just beside the building on the west side of the building. So that way, if there's going to be drop-offs, deliveries, things like that, there ought to be a dedicated spot for that as opposed to having them park on either King Street or Water Street. So we felt that was important. We also felt it was important not to have a walk-through area from King Street to Water Street and that become a dead space area. And so the developer is proposing putting benches back from the sidewalk, and so slightly offset back from the sidewalk, and then behind it having an 8-foot tall wrought iron fence. The reason why we're saying 8 feet tall is if it was 6 feet tall, you could stand on the bench and you only have to lift yourself 4 feet. If it's 8 feet tall, then that becomes a much more industrious event to try and get yourself over. And so certainly something that we want to deal with from that standpoint. Also noted in the plan, the exterior of the building will be a combination of stone and brick facing King Street. That wraps around the building, as well as there's cornices along the front of the building and the small wraparound of the stone and brick. The remainder of the building will be a combination of stone as well as non-combustible siding. And so we believe it fits in with the area and will not detract, but actually add to the overall ambiance of King Street. Finally, waste pickup, certainly always something that we want to be concerned about when we're taking a look at this. And we will not be offering waste pickup to this particular development due to the number of units that are inside. But they will be doing regularly scheduled pickups of the waste off of Water Street. So when you take a look at the site plan, the garbage room is at the front of the building. The superintendent will take the garbage, the accumulated garbage out of there, bring it to the back entrance, and it will be picked up off Water Street. So there's a number of reports that we went through and iterations of this. We're happy to bring it forward to council. It did go to planning advisory last week, worked through various questions and that sort of thing, and then we're able to bring it forward this evening. So I'll just open it up to questions at this point.
Thanks very much, Mr. Armstrong, for a very comprehensive report. Open it up for comments and questions, and straight off, I'll start with Ray Young. Councillor Young.
Thank you, Brett. I was just curious about the entrance off of Water Street. Is that parking garage at that level? Do you go down or do you go up off of Water Street?
So the building itself will be 5 meters from the edge of the inner edge of the sidewalk to the back of the building. And my understanding is that the parking garage is at ground level. So you'll neither be going up nor down, but completely straight in and
Okay.
then going from there.
Thank you.
Anything further, Councillor Young?
No.
Thank you. Open it up for other comments, questions. Councillor McConnell.
Thank you, Mayor Todd. I'm just harking back to a couple of terms ago when we were developing Riverwalk Park. And it seemed to me that a desirable feature in that park, which we wound up cutting for cost purposes, was what we called the Queen's Staircase, I believe it was, which was beside the Moore and Hooker building. And I think we actually own that property. And the idea was to hook that with a walkway through to King Street, which is essentially what we're talking about, not having a walkway through to King Street now. So I think that might be a subject for discussion for this council. The other thing I was curious about, the water diversion from this building. It's indicated that from the building itself, it's going to go, I believe, into the storm sewers on King Street. And then from the property beside it and behind, it's just going to flow naturally into Water Street. And from the pictures, it looks like this building has a sloped, shingled roof on it. And I'm curious how that's going to be accomplished, diverting that water into the storm sewers. Is it going to have eave troughs or something on it? I can't really tell from the picture.
Yeah, so Mr. Mayor. So absolutely, all of the roof area will be eaves troughed and downspouts that will then collect together and run into the storm sewer. In terms of either side of the building, it will likely be a river stone type of finish, just because it's going to be exceedingly difficult to get grass to grow in those areas. And so it will actually be able to permeate down through the soil itself. That's certainly something that we want to make sure that we weren't going to be causing any undue erosion either to either side of the building or any neighboring properties. And so it was a big part of the storm and servicing portion of the engineering reports.
Thank you very much, Mr. Armstrong. Any follow-up, Councillor McConnell?
The building, I believe, is recessed off of King Street, is it not? 2 or 3 meters?
No.
No, so the building itself will be even with the adjacent buildings. Certainly the one that's to the east, it will be adjacent to. And then there's the only part that will be set back a little bit is where the benches are and the wrought iron fence on either side.
Okay, the only thing that concerns me then with the slope roof to the front and the eave troughs and the fact that the face of it is going to be right on King Street, is the same problem that we've incurred with other buildings that have a sloped roof that are right on King Street, and that is in the winter with the eave troughs filling up with ice, and ice falling on the sidewalks. Originally, I thought this building was going to be set back a meter or so, which would meant we wouldn't have had that problem, but that could be a problem.
Matthew, Sean, any comment on that? That has been an issue in other downtown, the other block. I know there's a couple of buildings with fairly steep roofs that have this issue. Was this looked at all? And can you give us some reassurance on that?
I'm just taking a look at the actual plans, and my understanding is the vast majority of the slopes are going to be coming to the side. I'm just trying to confirm exactly what's coming to the front. But I think it's a much smaller area that's actually sloped towards the front as opposed to the massive parts that are on the side. So, but certainly just working on confirming that.
Just looking in the documentation now to try to confirm that, or?
Yep. So if you'd like to have a little bit of filler, that'd be more than fine.
We have the Jeopardy theme song we could just throw on here for a minute.
Does anybody want to hum?
Any other questions in regards to the development while Mr. Armstrong looks up some of that information?
Actually, my comment about the walkthrough, part of our official plan is that we tie the King Street walking area to the river, to the Riverwalk Park. And since this is going to have an adjacent area that is essentially going to be blocked off, I would be interested in other councillors' views on whether we should look to have that as an open walkthrough.
Yeah, I'll put that open. Anyone want to comment on that? I did see councillors Young and Burton had their hands up there a moment ago. I think Ray just beat Leanne to the punch, so I'll start with Councillor Young.
Well, I wasn't going to talk about that point, so we could, whatever you want to do.
Go ahead, and anyone else can chime in a moment on that or other items. So we'll just proceed in order like that.
I was going to ask Sean about when we might see the start of construction and how long it might take.
Mr. Merriman.
Yeah, not a problem. Construction can start shortly, basically after site plan approval is approved, and how long it takes depends on the building. They could do it in less than a year. At the same point, it could take longer.
Okay, thank you.
No problem.
Councillor Burton, please.
Thank you. A couple comments. During our meeting last week, I suggested a little gathering area instead of the river rock. That's going to be in there for picnic tables and benches in that little area. Not too sure if that was brought back to the builder. And the comment on Councilor McConnell's idea, I don't think it's a good idea to have a walk through area with Red George behind the building and Boomers and O'Keefe's on adjacent. So you'd be getting people walking through at 2 o'clock in the morning, maybe disturbing some residents. So thank you. Mr. Armstrong could comment on my first response. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Burton. I'll pass that on to Matthew. Any comment on that first point of Councillor Burton's from the PAC meeting last week?
Certainly. So the planner or one of the planning team members was on the call, and they didn't highlight any major issues with that. That's something they'll look at, but certainly they also want to make sure that one of the reasons for the river stone was to allow that permeation. So as long as they're not altering that permeation, then they have no issue with doing that sort of thing, but really it just comes down to making sure that we're not creating any water pooling type of issue. In terms of the second item, when you take a look at the elevations of the building and how it works, the vast majority of the roof will come to the sides. There is a portion that will flow towards the front of the building. But certainly, I'm taking a look also at the storm report, and there was no issues highlighted with icicle formation, but we can certainly go back and just make sure that it's something that we're the builder's aware of, and that we can take any action now to be able to address that issue.
And I see Sean just vanished there for a moment, but I'm assuming we will look at this through the process of building as well. And if it's an issue, we can require ice damming and so forth, because it would obviously create a safety issue if you know, anything did happen along those lines.
Correct. Yeah, you're correct. I mean, I was under the similar impression as Matthew from when I was reviewing the plans that the majority of the water was coming down the sides. But at the same point, I will double check just to make sure that we don't have any eaves troughs across the front that could create a problem.
Thanks very much, Sean. Councillor Young, you had another comment?
Don't I recall something in the report about saying that all that roof drain would be interior, would go through the interior of the building to go to the storm sewer?
Mr. Armstrong, Mr. Merriman?
Sorry. Yeah, I do believe it does, but it doesn't help if you've still got eaves troughs on the top collecting it and then taking it down through the inside. So like I said, it is certainly something that I'll make sure I double check on.
Okay.
Thanks very much, Councillor Young. Thanks, Sean. Any further comments? Councillor Schenker.
I was just making sure I'm not muted. Okay, good. The walkthrough that Councillor McConnell would propose, would be on the east side, I would assume.
Well,
is that what you mean, Lee?
no, I would say the west side, because it was meant to, the original plan was to line up with that space between the Moore and Hooker building and the Mariners Club. That would put it on the west side of this building, which I think is where the larger space is, if memory serves me correctly, unless I read it wrong.
That's what it looks like on the report. I don't know. I mean, if that walkthrough was proposed, who would be responsible for cleaning it? Like, is that like, do we do the snow plowing in there, and then are we responsible if anything happens in there and it's on their property? So I don't know if we can put a walkthrough there.
Well, what Councilor McConnell's referring to, we had that grand staircase plan for Water Street, but I think the cost, correct me if I'm wrong on this, I thought we were looking at $250,000 plus for that stairwell. It was significant, which was why it was removed. And that was a grand staircase that would essentially lead up from Riverwalk Park and go right to the back of this lot essentially. And the thought was that maybe we would buy this property or work with a developer with a P3 partnership kind of idea, where we would basically construct whether could be an apartment building, could have been any sort of purpose, but there would be an opening, so almost like an arcade walkway going from King Street to Water Street, and then of course you'd be able to see from King Street right down to the water. And that's something we've been trying to achieve for decades in town, I guess. That connectivity between King Street and water and the river, which has always been very difficult to achieve. And now that this is fully privately owned, this lot, and has a developer, it's kind of a difficult thing to retrofit that concept for this particular area. I think the concept itself is something we really need to still look at, but I'm not sure it exists in precisely this area now because of, well, the obvious changes and with an active developer proposing a building here. So it's a tough one, but I see the point.
Thank you.
Any further discussion? Councillor Ostrander.
Just curious, quite an extensive planning report attached to this proposal. And I just wondered, is this the original planning group that started out with the developer, or are these people sort of come in at this point with the development, you know? Or do we know?
I believe it's mostly the same group anyways, with Tracy Zander and her Zander Plan company doing the initial planning. But
Okay.
Mr. Armstrong
Yeah,
or
yeah.
Sean, please.
Yep. So all the way from our initial meeting all the way to now, their team has remained the same. It's Collards Engineering out of, I believe, Kempful, as well as Zander Plan out of Perth, and obviously the developer himself. So no, we're happy. We've been moving along in terms of how this would work. My only comment on having that kind of walkway is that then we're getting into putting the walkway in the same places that we have the visitor parking drop off, things like that. So I do have some concerns as to how that would be feasible and still try to maintain what we're trying to achieve in this particular development.
Thank you very much, Mr. Armstrong. Anything further, Councilor Ostrander?
No, I was just curious on the planning and if the whole team had been moving forward from the beginning. So that was good. Thank you.
Thank you. Further comments? If we could just capture that comment that Councilor McConnell made, though, I think it is something we need to really look at, because this building obviously will take away one of those one of the ways that we were planning at one time to connect the riverfront and Riverwalk Park with King Street to get more traffic flow, pedestrian and otherwise, back and forth to the waterfront. And I still think it's something we really need to look at. It's got to be a goal at some point. I don't think it works for this particular building now with the changes that have gone on. And also it still would be an expensive proposition, that stairwell. So I think there may be other ways to look at it, but I don't want to forget that. Councilor Shankar?
This is on the same subject though. That 3-story brick and vinyl building at 175 King Street, what's the status of that building? Is there people living in there? Is it empty? I know that the tattoo area has been not there for quite a few years. Like, is there a chance that the town could buy that piece of property and then make a pass through there?
I believe it is actively, or was actively, for sale. And the town actually tried to buy it in, when was that? 2017 or so, 2016. And we were actually outbid by a few dollars at the end of the day on that. But it is, from what I understand, it's actively up for sale. Sean, you look like you had a comment on that, a little more information?
Yeah, that is correct. That property is still actively for sale. It is currently unoccupied. It has no hot water, heat, or hydro to it. The only other problem with that property is it does not go all the way through to Water Street.
Oh.
How much of it's cut off in the back, Sean? It's just a slice, isn't it, really? But they don't have access.
No, they basically, it's just beyond the edge of the building, and it's cut right off. It's owned by the people that are at the corner of Center and Water Street there.
The old Dixie Lee.
Something that it'd be interesting to see what does happen to that property. And I'm certainly not against us acquiring it for the right price either, because it could, even despite this, there may be ways to work with the property owner and achieve something there. But I do know the developer even mentioned it to me a little while ago. So I don't know if there's some possibility. I mean, you've got to figure that a building like this going up right next door will trigger some interest in a few spaces downtown. And I would hope in particular a couple of the buildings on the south side there that have been unoccupied for quite a while. So hopefully this kicks off a little more development there overall. But that's an excellent point on that building, which has been in terrible shape for quite a number of years. I think 3 or 4 of us with a couple of hammers could go down and take the building to the ground in about an hour right now at the state that it's in. So good point to raise. Any further comments on this proposal this evening and the recommendation? Just really a quick comment myself. I just want to thank the developer, Stefano Ferrante. Steph's actually been a good partner of the town for a number of years, going back to the Ann Street development. And I know there's been some doubt in the community this was going to happen, but quite frankly, there were circumstances beyond our control with the province here that have since been rectified and on the way to being rectified. And I do believe from what was communicated last week from the planner that they are looking to start construction in the very near future. So we will see some activity on that site right away. And this is really something I think it's a good one for us to celebrate right now. And at any time, really, it's a $4 million investment on King Street. So it's a good thing to celebrate no matter what circumstances we're going through. But right now, in particular, with the COVID-19 crisis ongoing and the economic challenges that creates, the fact that we have a project like this going forward full steam this summer is a good testament to both Prescott and especially to the developer for continuing to invest the money in the community. So this is a good news story for us. And just a quick comment. I know we've had comments in the public about the historic nature of the building and so forth. And I think the design with the brick and the stone veneer will look really good. I think it'll be somewhat reminiscent of what we have at the fire hall. And also because I had some discussions with the developer about this, and this came to, I remember when we first talked about this, whether I think at planning, maybe it was planning committee or whenever we talked about this initially a year and a half ago. And I will note that at the top, they did change the design drawing a bit to include some cornices at the top, which gives it just that little bit of historical touch and should tie it in a little bit to some of our existing historical properties. So that was something that's on the mind of the developer and was on the mind of the town staff and everyone looking into this as well. So we not only have a nice new building down there, we've got something that ties into our heritage as well. So I think this is just a big win for all of us and something we can celebrate this evening in the middle of some really problematic and times of turmoil. So hats off to the developer and thanks to our staff and doing such a great job shepherding this through to this point. So with that, I will call the question and ask for the vote. All in favor? Motion's carried. Thanks, everyone.
Can I make, I wasn't going to interfere with the vote because I'm in favor of this anyway, but something just occurred to me when you were talking, Brad. Do you remember several years ago when we required the limit as part of some kind of a deal to fix that stone wall that basically the west wall of the restaurant is attached to, because it was a mess, and they spent several thousand, I would think, to have that resurfaced and painted, despite the fact that that's sitting on the hotel property. Now, the hotel property has been bought, obviously, and I don't know whether it's been communicated to the gentleman that's his wall. That is he going to be required to maintain that now, or where do we sit with that?
Good question. I got to admit, I don't. That's one I can't answer. I do remember some of those issues there with the other property. Matthew, Sean, do you have any comment on that? Anything like that come up in any discussions with the developer?
No, we haven't had any discussions with regards to that. My first initial thought would be, because it's part of the building beside, then it would be the responsibility of that building owner, but certainly we'll check through that from a legal perspective.
Okay, good. Yeah, good point, because there obviously been some issues with buildings on both sides there adjacent to this property that the developer obviously is going to have to take into account during the construction phase and beyond. So good point, Councilor McConnell. Okay, that moves us through the staff reports this evening. So into bylaws, and we do have a whole whack of bylaws. So start off with 7.1, site plan agreement for 950 Industrial Road. So the recommendation being bylaw 18-2020, being a bylaw to authorize a site plan agreement between the corporation of the town of Prescott and Prescott International Group, OA CAI Inc., be read first and second time. Do I have a mover, please? Moved by Councilor Young, seconded by Councilor Ostrander. Any discussion? All those in favor? Motion is carried. Thanks, everyone. And second recommendation there to finalize this is that bylaw 18-2020, being a bylaw to authorize a site plan agreement between the corporation of the town of Prescott and Prescott International Group, OA CAI Inc., be read a third time, passed and signed by the mayor and clerk. Do I have a mover, please? Moved by Councilor Jansman, seconded by Councilor Young. Any discussion? All those in favor? Motion is carried. Thank you. 7.2 is the site plan agreement to finalize the discussion and the recommendation from 171 King Street West. The first, second reading reads recommendation that bylaw 19-2020 being a bylaw to authorize a site plan agreement between the corporation of the town of Prescott and 1154923 Canada Inc. be read a first and second time. Can I have a mover, please? Moved by Councillor Burton, seconded by Councillor Shankar. Any discussion? All those in favor? Motion is carried. And finally, to wrap up that site plan agreement, we have the second recommendation that bylaw 19-2020 being a bylaw to authorize a site plan agreement between the corporation of the town of Prescott and 1154923 Canada Inc. be read a third time, passed, and signed by the mayor and clerk. Do I have a mover, please? Moved by Councillor Ostrander, seconded by Councillor Young. All those in favor? Motion is carried. And on to some newer business, not precisely new, but relating to our budget approval and the recommendations passed at the last meeting. So 7.3 is our 2020 estimates bylaw. The recommendation being that bylaw 20-2020 being a bylaw to adopt the estimates for the sums required during the year 2020 for general purposes of the corporation of the town of Prescott be read a first and second time. Do I have a mover, please? Moved by Councillor Young, seconded by Councillor McConnell. Any discussion on that, Mr. Armstrong or Councillor Young as our Chair of Finance?
I think it's been discussed many, many times at different meetings. I think we're all aware of what it is. And in keeping with the trend of most of our municipalities around here, we are going with a 0% increase, and hopefully we'll get through the year.
Thank you very much, Councillor Young. Mr. Armstrong, as treasurer, any comments on that to follow Councillor Young?
So just, this is more of a housekeeping item. So the budget was passed at our previous meeting. This is to assign how much the total levy will be for 2020 for property taxes. And so that's certainly, this is the enacting bylaw to allow for that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other comments from members of council this evening? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? Motion is carried. And the following recommendation there is that bylaw 20-2020 being a bylaw to adopt the estimates for the sums required during the year 2020 for general purposes of the corporation of the town of Prescott be read a third time, passed, and signed by the mayor and clerk. Do I have a mover? Moved by Councillor Ostrander, seconded by Councillor Burton. Any final discussion? All those in favor? Motion is carried. And these are all going to sound fairly similar to everyone watching at home this evening or taped later on. 7.4 is the 2020 tax ratios bylaw. Recommendation being that bylaw 21-2020 being a bylaw to set tax ratios for the year 2020 be read a first and second time. Do I have a mover, please? Moved by Councillor McConnell, seconded by Councillor Young. Councillor Young, I'll go to you again first. Any comment on this as our Chair of Finance?
No, this is the procedure we have to follow whenever we pass a budget. So this time I'm sure that everything balances.
So is the hope. Any comments from other members of council? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? And to follow that, of course, is the third time, the third reading. And that recommendation reads as following: that bylaw 21-2020 being a bylaw to set tax ratios for the year 2020 be read a third time, passed, and signed by the mayor and clerk. Can I have a mover, please? Moved by Councillor Burton, seconded by Councillor McConnell. All those in favor? Motion is carried. And 7.5, the 2020 tax rates bylaw. First recommendation here reads that bylaw 22-2020 being a bylaw to adopt tax rates for municipal purposes for the year 2020 be read a first and a second time. Can I have a mover, please? Moved by Councillor Ostrander, seconded by Councillor Young. Give you another chance, Ray. It's probably not much the same comment as before, but anything to say on this one?
No, nothing special. No.
All good. Any further discussion from other members of council? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? Motion's carried. And the second recommendation there is that bylaw 22-2020 being a bylaw to adopt tax rates for municipal purposes for the year 2020 be read a third time, passed and signed by the mayor and clerk. Can I have a mover, please? Moved by Councillor Burton, seconded by Councillor Young. All those in favor? Motion is carried. And on to 7.6, the last of our tax bylaws. This is the 2020 capping thresholds bylaw. Recommendation is that bylaw 23-2020 being a bylaw to adopt optional tools for the purposes of administering limits for the commercial, industrial, and multi-residential property classes for the year 2020 be read a first and second time. Can I ask for a mover, please? Moved by Councillor Shankar, seconded by Councillor Ostrander. Open it up for discussion. Mr. Chair of Finance.
This one has some significance to industrial and commercial properties, multi-residential properties. So I'm going to let Matthew give us the details, please.
Thank you very much, Councillor Young. Mr. Armstrong.
Certainly. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. So with this particular bylaw, what we're doing is providing for maximum amounts of increases and decreases for capped properties. That being said, we currently don't have any capped properties in the town of Prescott, but if we did, these would apply for those. And when you have a capped property, it means that the amount that the property taxes from one year to the next can only go up by a certain amount, and it's a fairness type of activity. That being said, again, we don't have any properties that are currently capped, and so but it is something that we require to have in place.
Thanks very much, Mr. Armstrong. Anything further to that, Mr. Finance Chair?
Nope, nothing at all.
Thank you. Anything else from other members of council? Comments or questions, please? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? Motion is carried. Thanks, everyone. And to follow that up and finalize that, the next recommendation is that bylaw 23-2020 being a bylaw to adopt optional tools for the purposes of administering limits for the commercial, industrial, and multi-residential property classes for the year 2020 be read a third time, passed and signed by the mayor and clerk. Can I have a mover, please? Moved by Councillor Burton, seconded by Councillor Young. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Motion is carried. Thanks again, everyone. And we're on to the confirming bylaw. It's item 8 on our agenda this evening. Confirming bylaw is 24-2020. Recommendation being that bylaw 24-2020 being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the special meeting of council held on June 1st, 2020 be read a first and second time. Can I have a mover, please? Moved by Councillor Ostrander, seconded by Councillor McConnell. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Thanks, everyone. Motion carried. And second verse, same as the first, that bylaw 24-2020 being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the special council meeting held on June 1, 2020 be read a third time, passed and signed by the mayor and clerk. Can I have a mover, please? Moved by Councillor Burton, seconded by Councillor Shankar. Any discussion? All those in favor? Motion is carried, and that takes us right to 9 and adjournment this evening. Just want to thank everybody for a very good meeting, and it wasn't quite 7:15, but it was awfully close, so maybe we should have done the pool. Can I have a motion for adjournment, please? Moved by Councillor Shankar, seconded by Councillor Ostrander. All in favor? Thanks, everyone. We're adjourned. Thanks, everyone, for participating. Thanks, everyone, for watching. Take care. Stay well.